I was muted. Sorry about that. Let me start over. Hi, everyone. My name is Bridget Arndell, and I'm a manager of communications and impact at Community Nature Connection. Thank you for joining us today for this panel. Community Nature Connection is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to increase access to the outdoors for communities impacted by racial, socioeconomic, and disability injustices by eliminating existing barriers through advocacy, community-centered programming, and workforce development. So today we have our environmental careers panel, which is really exciting. This panel is brought to you as part of CNC's Training Institute, which offers training and certification programs that are aimed at increasing knowledge and skill building in outdoor related fields. If you have any questions or suggestions for discussions or trainings that you'd like to see in the future, feel free to email us at training@communitynatureconnection.org. If you have any questions throughout the panel, feel free to drop those questions in the chat. Before I turn it over to the panelists to introduce themselves, join me in acknowledging this land on which Community Nature Connection operates. We acknowledge this land on which CNC operates as the ancestral lands and home of the Tongva, Tataviam, Quiche, and Chumash peoples, original stewards and custodians of this territory. We recognize their continuing connection to the land, waters, and culture, and we pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. So with that, I invite participants to share your name, organization, and native ancestral lands in the chat box if you feel comfortable. And before we pass it over to the panelists, I do want to address the goals of today's panel. We hope to raise awareness about working in the environmental and outdoor related careers. We hope to inform participants of the different and unique experiences that the panelists have had that have inspired and guided them in the environmental careers and professions that they're in today. We hope that this panel also highlights the stories and voices that the panelists bring together as being part of a racial group that has historically not been seen in large numbers in the environmental careers and professions. So with that, let's get started. I'm going to pass it over to Commissioner Reyes to start us off.
Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure and my privilege to be here. I'm Susanna Reyes. I'm here in the city of Los Angeles from the land of the Tongva peoples. We also have 4 million residents here that we serve. I serve as a commissioner of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. By the way, my pronouns are she, her. And as the commissioner of the biggest municipal utility in the nation, I have the privilege of being the first Filipino-American appointed to the commission and the first retiree to be appointed to the commission by LA Mayor Eric Garcetti and the City Council. As you know, the LADWP is governed by a 5-member board of commissioners, and we direct the utility which has been in existence for 120 years now, by setting policies for the Department of Water and Power through their operations, programs, and services, their finances, and the water rights that we have, and our community engagement. The department's general manager reports to the board, which I am very pleased to tell everyone, for the first time in the department's 120 years of existence, we have an all-female-led board. And I serve as the vice president on that board. The LADWP exists to support the growth and the vitality of the city of LA, its residents, businesses, and the communities we serve, providing safe, reliable, and cost-effective water and power in a customer-focused and environmentally responsible manner. So today, I will be sharing my stories with you as to how I got here, how I became, I want to call myself an environmental warrior and a climate justice change maker, because I have been very passionate from the very beginning to really protecting the environment and fighting for change, for systemic change, so that then we have a future that young people and everybody, 4 million residents of the city of Los Angeles, can enjoy equally. Thank you for this time.
Thank you, Commissioner Reyes. I'm going to pass it over to Alex Troutman now.
Hey y'all, I'm Alex Troutman. My pronouns are he, him. I'm coming from you guys from Georgia. I'm a wildlife biologist and current graduate student. Here. I've been a wildlife biologist for around 7 years. I started with the Fish and Wildlife Service, and went on to the National Park Service, and now I'm currently an endangered species observer while I am completing my master's degree. And I will be looking at the diets of seaside sparrow nestlings in the tidal salt marshes of Georgia.
Thank you, Alex. Let's pass it over to Kelkiyana.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kelkiyana Yazzie. Kelkiyana I am Navajo. I am the Folded Arm People clan, and I'm born for the Reed People clan. My maternal grandpa is of Euro-American descent, and my paternal grandpa is of the Edgewater clan. I am currently a park ranger at Navajo National Monument, which is managed by the National Park Service on the Navajo Nation in northern Arizona. I'd be really surprised if anybody's been here or heard of our park. We're a very small rural park. And I am also a graduate student, just like Alex. I go to school at Northern Arizona University here in Flagstaff. And my master's is in Parks and Recreation Management. That's what I am pursuing. And a big part of my practicum is to expose and increase and strengthen the relationship of Indigenous people to the National Park Service units as far as interpretation, like how they're interpreted at different parks. So a lot of it does tie back into the park I work at, where we protect 3 ancestral Pueblo cliff dwellings that date back to 1300 AD. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm open to any questions, and I'll talk a little bit more about what I do and my past experiences later on in the session. Thanks.
All right, thank you for your introductions. Jumping off what Kelkiyana just mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I do have about 6 questions for the panelists though, so we'll go ahead and get started. Back to Commissioner Reyes, can you describe a time in your life when you knew you wanted to be working with the environmental sector?
There's many sort of like inflection points in my life, but one of the first ones was, I immigrated here from the Philippines, where I experienced firsthand the degradation of our natural resources and the impact on people's health. My family and community experienced water rationing, power outages, air pollution, and food insecurity, which affected the quality of our lives. I've also experienced the impacts of environmental justice while living in the Philippines, where clusters of asthma sufferers can be found in fence-lined communities adjacent to refineries, power plants, and manufacturing companies. So that really helped shape my opinion and my vision of what should be done, and that there are a lot of things that needed to be done. And during my student days, I, together with some of our teachers, I recall, visited the poor barrios to deliver donations of sacks of rice and canned goods, and taught the community members about nutrition, you know, how to get vaccinations for their children. I can say again that those experiences growing up shaped my passion and commitment to environmental protection and climate justice. Because when it comes to the exposure to the environmental impacts, you know, people of color are disproportionately impacted, and underrepresented and low-income communities are also more likely, as you know, to be concentrated in areas with nearby toxic waste sites, landfills, and environmental hazards, like I experienced. But when I came here to the United States, we settled in Los Angeles, and I also started working with the city of Los Angeles as a management analyst. And within a few years, I received a promotion to implement the city's first city facilities recycling program. The only item I know how to recycle by then was my soda can. But I learned from scratch how to manage an environmental program as huge and as important as the recycling program for the city of Los Angeles. That we all know now, if you live in the city of LA, we do have a robust recycling program. So from a 2-person office, I was able to grow the operations into a 40-person staff when I left it after 7 years to work for the LADWP. And I know when I left it, I really felt that I made a difference growing the program and making sure that the people, even the city folks, our elected officials, value, you know, recycling and reduction of our consumption because they impact the environment. I also worked as a senior sustainability policy analyst in the mayor's office, and that really helped me policy-wise to really take a look at greater impacts now on climate, and looking at the greenhouse gas emissions, you know, electrification of buildings, electrification of our transportation sector, and how those measures from the mayor's office, being the policy office, will help the city of Los Angeles in terms of being more sustainable. And here it is in that, while doing that work, that I had a lot of satisfaction knowing that those policies can be implemented and operationalized by the city departments, like the LADWP for energy efficiency matters, like the Bureau of Sanitation for the recycling impacts, even the Department of Aging for their impact on our senior communities. And then when I became the director for low-income customer access, that really is something that is near and dear to my heart, because then that's the time when I am at a place where I know that I have the power and the influence and the megaphone, right, to really ensure that our low-income customers qualify for financial assistance for their utility bills, and that they can access you know, energy efficiency and water conservation programs to help them reduce their energy burden. So there's many inspirational points that I can point to that helped me really focus in my career. I don't see myself really as having an environmental career. I see myself as really being an advocate more, first and foremost, for our communities, and also looking at some volunteer work that I will be talking about later, because for me, activism is the rent that we pay for our stay here on Earth. Thank you.
For me, it was several different experiences that led me to believe that I wanted to work in an environmental career. Like just growing up, like I was always interested in nature and the outdoors. Like I had the luxury and privilege of having a family that did things outdoor. I went fishing with my dad, uncle, and brothers. And then I also happened to be out of norm where I had land. My parents owned the house that had a creek in the backyard, and we actually had some land. Whereas many other people of color at that time didn't have that. Most of them lived in a city. So I was able to, from an early age, go ahead and knew that I wanted to be working in the environmental sector. I originally thought I wanted to be a vet at first, though. I saw Steve Irwin on TV and Jeff Corrin and knew that I wanted to work with wildlife like they did. That the only people who worked with animals that I knew of who were Black like me were either veterinarians or farmers. So for the longest time, I decided that I was going to be a vet, and I went all the way up into into college, freshman year of college, believing I was going to be a vet. And then I realized the high depression rates that vets have. So I actually switched my major to middle age education, a minor in biology. And during that time, I took a field biology course, ornithology. And that's when it actually switched that, like, I'm going to make this environmental career work. So during the field ornithology course, we went outside and we were looking for birds, and I got to see my first ever wood duck, which is a beautiful duck. It's my favorite duck, and just being outside and seeing that duck and experiencing all of the other bird sounds that were happening, I realized that I'm going to make being a wildlife biologist work. So I immediately switched my major back and continued throughout my throughout my bachelor's degree, and got a bachelor's in biology. And from there, I went and took an internship with the Student Conservation Association up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, as a park ranger. So that was my first real experience with environmental education that I was able to get. And that part, it was actually a little bit not really hostile, but it was difficult because we were coming into the parks as a new agency. The people of the area actually thought we were replacing the police officers that was in the park, and thought we would be enforcing rules and taking the police officers' jobs. But we had to explain to them and show them, like, no, like, we're not here to like enforcing rules or like write tickets. We're here for you to get into the park. Like, you have these 9 beautiful parks in your county. We want you to be able to come here and enjoy the parks and see what they're about, what they have to offer. So once we were able to get them on our side, so to speak, that internship became definitely like a turning point in my career, where I knew, like, not only do I want to do wildlife biology, but I also wanted to educate people about the nature that surround them. So on top of being a wildlife biologist, I decided I also wanted to have some aspect of teaching about the environment. I didn't know what it was at the time, but now it's turned scientific communication. So now that's one of the big things that I also do alongside of being a wildlife biologist. So after I left the park ranger job, I took another job working with the Zoo Atlanta and Georgia Aquarium, where I got to refine and develop more of my skills in education. I was an educator and animal handler at Zoo Atlanta and the Georgia Aquarium. So at the Georgia Aquarium, most of the animals are behind an enclosure in the glass. And so I wasn't able to actually physically handle them, but I was able to speak about them and give a conversation message to individuals that would come to the aquarium. And then at the zoo, I actually had the opportunity to take animals to people. Like, so I was able to take animals to school groups and share what the animal was and what it was about. and to give a conservation message for them. So I did that for about a year, and then I got a job working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in New Richmond, Wisconsin. I didn't know where it was at the time, and in fact, it's so small that most people in Wisconsin don't even know where it's at. So I took that job working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It was my first, I can say, first real job working with as a wildlife biologist. My main job up there was to do a lot of habitat restoration, restoring the prairie lands and prairie grasses in order for us to reintroduce butterflies. So a Conner blue butterfly there, endangered butterfly that used to be throughout the whole region of Wisconsin, but now they're in hot spots throughout the state. So our goal was to try to incorporate and reintroduce this butterfly back into its historic range. So we collected around 400 eggs and around 16 females and reared them in a greenhouse and released them into our on our waterfowl production area there. So like every new job that I got, from being a park ranger to working at zoo and aquarium, and then eventually heading on to working as a wildlife biologist with the Fish and Wildlife Service, kept adding on extra steps and like pretty much redefining that like this is that's what I'm supposed to do. So just kept adding on, like making them building blocks that I knew this is what I was gonna do. So from there I went on to get a job with the National Park Service as a sea turtle biologist in Corpus Christi, Texas. And there I kind of really got to experience what the environment is like. So Corpus Christi, Texas is on the Gulf. And what's cool about it is that the waters of Corpus Christi, Texas is mixing with some of the Mississippi waters that's coming along, but also the ocean waters. So a lot of the trash that is coming down throughout America is actually coming back onto the beach. So a lot of the people, like on the front part of the beach, it looks very clean, but the back part of the beach where it's remote and you have to have 4-wheel drive, it's kind of dirty because all of the debris and plastics and trash that's on there. So it's kind of my first eye-opening experience. So like trash is not just like in the middle of the ocean, and it's not just like in other countries, but it's here in America. And like that's definitely something that we all have to do something about. And it's not like before, for me, like it wasn't really since I really didn't see it, it wasn't like, oh, this is like a big problem in America. But now I'm actually looking at it. I'm driving by it every day. Like I'm seeing sea turtles like go across some of this trash trying to make a nest. So now I'm like, this is definitely something that I want to do something about. So from there I started going ahead. I already use less plastic, but I wanted to make sure that I definitely decrease that even more, and also like start egging on my family to continue to use less plastic and start recycling. So after that, I came back home after doing it for 2 years and started edging my family on to not only recycle more and use more plastic, but now also I started getting back out in my community to not only ensure that they're using less plastic, but also, like I said, when I was growing up, I didn't have that representation of seeing a Black individual working wildlife. So I wanted to give back to those individuals. So I started engaging with local homeschool groups to show them what a Black scientist is, what a wildlife biologist is, so that they can see it. So now that's one of my jobs. It's been that representation. I go out into my communities and show them that they too can be a wildlife biologist, that people of color are also scientists, and we can do everything else that other people are doing. And I guess one really turning point I forgot to mention about this is when I was in Wisconsin, like I went to a weigh station to weigh one of our governmental trucks, and a white truck driver came up to me and he was like, "Oh, are you in maintenance?" Even though I had a full Fish and Wildlife Service uniform on, and I was just like, "No, I'm actually one of the biologists." And he like shrugged it off, was like, "Oh, haha." And then like I'm like, just because like I'm black, like you think like the highest position I can have is maintenance. Like no disrespect to the maintenance individuals, they definitely help conservation initiatives. But for him to automatically put a glass ceiling on me, for me to just be a maintenance worker and not one of the scientists was like how can you do that? You don't even know me, but you already have a bias against me that I'm not a scientist. I'm this. So that was one of my kind of like turning points. Like I'm gonna like show everyone that I am a scientist. That everyone can be a scientist. It's not geared toward the normal cookie cutter scientist of a person who's white, usually a white male and wears glasses and a lab coat. Like no scientist can be black. Scientists can be any person of color. Scientists can be any gender, but we're not limited to what people try to mold us into. Like we're outside of the cookie cutter mold. So that's one thing that kind of like spurs me on to continue into the environment sector.
All right, I'll go ahead and answer the question next. So I spent a majority of my childhood growing up on the Navajo reservation, which has like a population of a couple thousand, 100,000 people spread out across this large area that they say is about the size of West Virginia. So it's very sparsely populated, and there are a lot of environmental issues that take place here, such as illegal dumping, water contamination, overgrazing from livestock, like the list goes on. And then also people don't have basic access to basic resources such as running water and electricity. Still today, I didn't even get electricity and running water until I was in 4th grade. So growing up like that, along with the school system not having like a lot of environmental education. Like when I was in middle school, there was only one science teacher for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So yeah, it's kind of surprising how I got here. But when I was the summer after high school, I grew up next to a park that's like 5 miles from my house, which is the park I work at, Navajo National Monument. And they were doing a summer program for high school students. And so I decided to apply for it. And before that, I used to just drive by it every day. I knew like my aunt worked there, and my grandpa worked there at one point, and then my great grandpa. So I was just like, oh, that's cool. That's a nice little park. But I never really visited it. And I'm sure most people have like a big attraction or historical landmark near them that they don't really go visit. So that's what it was kind of like for me. But when I did this high school program, which was a youth conservation corps, I was exposed to how this park was getting visited by people from all over the world. And they all had this genuine interest in the environment, the history, the heritage of the area and the park. And I was just so shocked by that. Because growing up in that area for so many years, I'm like, oh yeah, that's just a canyon. That's just an old house that people used to live in a couple 100 years ago when I was referring to the cliff dwellings. But yeah, after just seeing the general public's interest in our small little park in our rural part of the state, I was just like, wow, I really want to like help with this. I really want to help educate people on what happens here and what life's like for our residents, and to kind of just carry on our cultural heritage and how people are still practicing that today. So I went to college. At first I was a history major, but I took an intro to environmental studies class, and that's when I switched to environmental sciences. even like halfway through my academic career. I don't know how young the participants are here, but when you're in college and you're thinking about changing your major, like you can do it. Because that's something I thought when I was an undergrad, is that I couldn't change my major, or like it was too late to, or anything like that. But if you do want to do that, I would suggest talking to your academic advisor. But that's how I got exposed to more environmental education. As I mentioned earlier, growing up on the reservation, I didn't really see that. But when I did my college, I went to Fort Lewis College in Durango, Colorado, which is the perfect place for it, with the mountains and the desert just right there. That's when I got really exposed to, and I knew I wanted to pursue a career with the environmental field. And yeah, after graduating, I got hired at the park that I grew up next to. And I'm an interpretive ranger, so I lead tours into the cliff dwellings, and we do all this research about the heritage, about the environment, about the biology, the botany, and the list goes on. And we do still get visited by people from all over the world, and I would say about 99.5% of the visitors are very respectful and open-minded, and they do have a genuine interest in our little small park. I had these rangers from Grand Canyon National Park on my tour one time, and they came up to me afterwards and they're like, wow, we're so impressed. They're like, people were really asking you questions about the environment, about the history. They're like, all we get asked is like, where's this overlook? Where's the bathrooms? So I thought that was an eye-opener, and that's what I really like about working at my park. It's my backyard. It's very small, so I get a lot of intimate, more hands-on personal experiences with the resources as well as the park visitors. Yeah.
Thank you all for sharing those intimate stories about your journey in terms of what sparked your interest in the environment and how you ended up where you are now. And I just want to affirm that you belong where you are, and I'm really happy to see you thriving in these roles, even though you didn't see a lot of representation when you were younger. I also found it a little disturbing that there's a commonality that in the communities we grew up with, we saw a lot of degradation of the land and the environment happening around us, the lack of resources and things like that, which is something we should actively be working to fight against. So thank you again for sharing that. I want to move into the next question here. If you can describe your current role, how it relates to the environment, and some of the most rewarding and challenging parts of the job.
So should I start again?
Yes, please.
All right. So thank you for those stories. I really relate to the, to our experience with the environment and the communities around us. As the first Filipino American commissioner and the first retiree on the board of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, I take my responsibilities seriously because I know that I have to be transparent and be accountable for the delivery of programs and services of this utility, which is the biggest utility in the nation, and also to make sure that the services that we provide are delivered equitably and fairly to all of our customers. And that's a huge, obligation and commitment on my part. Being in the environmental space, I understand and fully acknowledge the role of local government. And I think for those of you envisioning environmental careers in government, I say this is a very good time to be in it, because cities wield real power over the emissions released within their borders, including from cars, power plants, factories, and buildings. And the city of Los Angeles is not waiting for a top-down approach it is taking the lead. We now have binding plans for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and we lead in our plan for 100% clean energy, low carbon building, electrification of the transportation sector, and resiliency programs. My ultimate goal is to really make sure that we protect the water and the land that we own, and that we mitigate the impacts of any decisions that the board makes on behalf of the utility, knowing that with climate change, we'll be facing more wildfire and heat storms, drought, and a lot of those climate change impacts. And we are not just in the city of Los Angeles, we are in Owens Valley, we are in the Inyo, we have, projects in Utah, and all of those places where communities are thriving, where jobs are being created. As a commissioner, I would like to ensure that impacts are lessened, and that is done through the many employees that we have. We have 11,000 employees in the city of Los Angeles who work in different jobs, but they are all connected to the environment. They all know that whatever we do, we need to do no harm, and that we want to create a clean energy future for the city while maintaining a reliable and cost-effective power supply for our customers. Our future energy supply will have zero coal. We'll be expanding our renewables, energy efficiency, and clean energy project. So the city has set those ambitious goals to perform its energy supply. We have our LA 100, and I don't know if you have heard about it. It's this robust independent study of the different pathways that will lead the city of Los Angeles towards 100% renewable energy. In fact, the mayor just made an announcement about a week ago that the city is ahead of its schedule towards becoming a 97% carbon-free by 2030. So DWP will determine the path forward using clean energy alternatives such as solar paired with battery storage as we pursue our 100% renewable goals. And there's going to be a lot of jobs that will be created with that because that shift is really just going to be really transformative. We're going to shift focus from, repowering our in-basin power plants to just clean energy alternatives. We're going to have local solar and energy efficiency and demand response. Even with our water, we have a new, sort of like robust effort to have a new water supply initiative. We call it Operation Next, NEXT, that's being developed by DWP in partnership with our LA Sanitation and Environment that aims to improve the overall water resiliency and reliability for Los Angeles. So that means that we will allow for like 100% recycling of available treated wastewater for beneficial reuse that will help the city achieve the long-term sustainability goals. So the mayor plans to have 70% of our water sourced locally, so that then it will have huge impact for water demand forecasting, conservation efforts, and activities to really develop alternative sources of water. Again, because we have, as usual, our city, Southern California, is always in danger of facing more severe droughts because of the climate impacts. But for me, it's not just about the transition to renewables. It's really more of a holistic approach of the role that LADWP and my role as a commissioner will play in, say, workforce development and economic development, while centering our work around equity and justice. How can we do better in learning and recognizing the experiences of our vulnerable communities? How will we involve the stakeholders in decision making and in soliciting local knowledge, for example, for energy projects? How can we move away from a false binary such as jobs versus the environment, and towards a systemic approach such as jobs for the environment, and creating an economy that really works for people? As a commissioner, I chair the ad hoc workforce development committee that oversees jobs creation within the city. I also serve as the tribal liaison for the department because we work with a number of tribes in our Owens Valley and Inyo areas. And I'm also spearheading the revision of the equity metrics and the LA Equity Stakeholders Forum and the low income utility programs. I also want to mention that I'm on the governing board of the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, and in that role, I was appointed by Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon. And that the Sierra Nevada Conservancy is a state agency that is charged to initiate, encourage, and support efforts that improve the environmental, economic, and social well-being of the Sierra Nevada region. Which we draw like 70% of our water from the watersheds. So the key initiative we have there is the Sierra Nevada Watershed Improvement Program. And with the forest health as the foundation, we want to look at restoring the healthy ecosystems, improving community resilience, and promoting sustainable recreation there. What's really rewarding and at the same time challenging in my job and in my volunteer work. I love to learn, and I think this is one thing that I would like everyone to really acknowledge, is that continuous learning is key. We are human beings that may come in with our own opinions shaped by the way we have lived and experienced our work, but the open mindset and really learning continuously helps me a lot in ensuring that the work that I do will have a positive impact. The other thing is on the policy making. I've had many years, decades of years of experience, and you'll see that in your career you will be transitioning from one career or job to another, but everything is interconnected. You will see that the work that you do, how you can connect it to promote or restore a natural ecosystem, how you can cut down on carbon footprints, for example, and conserve natural resources, how you can find ways to reuse, reduce, and recycle, how you can decrease hazardous waste materials, knowing that your knowledge is so portable that you can apply your skills and your experience to the whatever work that you are currently doing. But in my role, again, going back to my role as a commissioner, I find it very challenging to work with our government regulations and requirements. Sometimes we want to do better, but we have all those regulations that hamstring or tie our hands that we can't really push and be more aggressive about. Here in the city of Los Angeles, we also have the civil service rules, which actually is more of a barrier than of a help in making sure that we have recruited folks locally for jobs that are available within the city of Los Angeles. And again, I also grapple a lot with the culture. so many experiences within the Department of Water and Power that we still need to change. And on the environmental side, I know that that is a priority, but I would like to see our employees really connect their work more to environmental justice and climate justice and restorative justice. So I'll stop there and have my other colleagues share their stories in this space. Thank you.
Yes, so my current roles are a graduate student and a wildlife biologist as endangered species observer. So as a graduate student, what I'm studying is the seaside sparrow nestling diet. So basically, I spent all summer walking through a tidal salt marsh. So a tidal salt marsh is a marsh that is flooded twice a day by tides or nearby bodies of water. So I'm going out there looking for seaside sparrows nests. So they nest in the tidal salt marsh along channels that help feed the marsh water. So they nest along those channels. So I'm looking to first see where the nests are. And then once I find the nest, I'm pinning cameras on the nest to see what the parents are bringing back to the babies, the nestlings, to eat. Then secondarily, I'm studying the arthropods community that's around the nest in the marsh. So I'm taking sweet net samples around the nest to see what's available for them to eat. So not only am I looking at what they're eating, but I'm seeing what's available in throughout the whole marsh for them to eat. And then also what arthropods are out throughout the whole marsh. So like I said, I'm looking at those as a graduate student to see what seaside sparrow and nesting are eating. And then as an endangered species observer, my job when I'm not during school breaks, I'm on a boat in the not really the middle of the ocean. So we're either anywhere from 5 miles to 20 miles out at sea, digging up sand and then bringing it back to the beach to throw it back on the beach after hurricanes. There's a process called beach renourishment. So my job as the ESO on this boat is to make sure the dredging company is not picking up any sea turtles or other endangered marine animals. So like saltfish, but also if we're along the Atlantic coast, making sure that they're not running into any marine mammals that are endangered, like right whales or manatees. So yeah, my job is to watch while we're traveling back and forth to the dump site or dig site, and then also while they're digging to make sure any whales or sea turtles are not coming back up. But when we are done digging, I have to check the digging instruments. We have a TED on that instrument. It's called a turtle exclusion device. So I make sure that that device is still in working order and excluding turtles from getting. But in the event that any turtles are dug up, I have to make sure that the first, if they're still alive, I have to get them ashore to a rehab center. And then if they're dead, I have to prove that the cause of death is not from the dig instrument, but from other causes. Otherwise, the project has to be shut down if we collect too many sea turtles. So I'm there to make sure that sea turtles are not getting dug up, and then also to prove that the actual cause of their death if they are dug up, and then prevent any mammals, marine mammals that are coming in contact or close to the vicinity of the boat is not injured or ran into. So I'm communicating with the captains and the other controllers of the boat to protect these endangered species while we're doing these dredging operations. Some of the most rewarding parts of my job as either a grad student working in the marsh is definitely seeing all the birds out there. There's so many different species, from like my favorite shorebird, the roseate spoonbill, to some of the other birds that are somewhat annoying, just because they call and alert every time you walk by. So like the marsh wren, but still seeing those birds are still like a rewarding part. But also just seeing how the tidal marsh changed throughout the day. So when it's dry versus when it's starting to flood back in when the tide is coming in, like you can see it change and see like start fish are coming back in with the tide. So you see it has a whole different ecosystem from when it's dry and wet, and just seeing the marvels of that. And then like being on the dredging ship, the rewards of seeing like being out at sea, seeing dolphins jump, and then seeing like magnificent frigate birds, which are like a giant bird. They're beautiful. You should look them up. But they're seeing those sights and just seeing that and seeing like sunsets out at the ocean or some rewarding or other rewarding jobs, parts of the job. But one of my other jobs is I'm a Susana Center Fellowship. So I'm a Susana Center Fellow. So part of my fellowship is engaging with the community. So I get to pretty much go outside and explore with different community members. Right now, mostly it's younger kids. So I get to show them how to use the binoculars and giggle at them when we try to look at a bird, but our binoculars are turned around backwards, or I get to be the lucky person to carry handfuls of worms and sticks, because that's what some of the kids are picking up as we're on these nature hikes. And of course, they don't want to put them in their pockets, so I'm the one who gets to hold them. So that's some of the rewarding parts, is getting to see all those different animals, but also being able to work with these kids and encourage the next generation of scientists, because like we're not borrowing this earth, we are borrowing this earth from like kids who are not born yet, but we also are borrowing it from the kids who are on this earth now. So we as adults and decision makers have to make sure that the policies and the work that we're doing are going to help to make sure that these animals, the environment, are here, and it's going to be hospitable for them, the future generation, like the kids that are looking out here now. As they grow up, they're going to have the same animals. They're going to have the same resources that we have. So we need to do our duty to help to cultivate and conserve the resources that we have, because we're borrowing from the younger generation. So one of the challenging parts is like sometimes the work environment, especially working in the natural resource field, many times it is like, if you're the only person that looks like sometimes you are lonely, just because like even though some of the people, your colleagues who you work with, they mean well and they can be the best people, but sometimes they just don't have the same like mannerisms, or they don't have the I don't know how to say it, the same mannerism, like the same. Then they don't have the same connections that I guess that you would have. So while they're lovely, like they still, like you still can feel, I guess, like homesick and alone, just because you're not really always connecting on the same way you would connect with someone who's from the same area, or have the same background. I guess, yeah, that's what I was trying to say. The same background as you. So that is one of the challenging parts. And then another challenging part is that a lot of times, like, for instance, when I was working with the Fish and Wildlife Service, one of my jobs was to go around to update the boundary and change the signs. But a lot of times, some individuals will see the work you're doing and say it's wasting their tax money, even though you're doing a job for them. So like for instance, when I was working with the Fish and Wildlife Service, like I was changing the boundary signs, and a couple of them had been like they're either faded or they were shot up. So I was changing the signs, and one of the neighbors came and he was like, why are you wasting my tax money changing these signs? And like I went to like tell him like, hey, like these signs are here for like not only like people who utilize this public lands protection, but also for your protection. Like if they were to come off this land and continue to hunt, like you could get injured, or if you were to go on the land and hunt on their land, like they could get injured. So by me like reposting these boundary signs, I'm protecting you and also the individuals that utilize these public lands. But he was upset that I was changing the signs, and the sign had been shot up. So like I changed it, and then once I got done changing, he was like, yeah, so I'm just gonna shoot up again when you leave. And I was like, well, you can do that. I'm gonna get paid for it, so go ahead and shoot it. I'm gonna get paid to come back out here. And two, since I know I changed it, I'm gonna come out here with law enforcement if it is shot up, and we're gonna file a report. He was like, oh, I'm just joking. But he wasn't really joking. He was just saying that because I mentioned law enforcement and he got caught. So that's one of the challenging parts, is that people that have this way of thinking that we're wasting their taxpayer money because we're doing things with the natural resource, so they don't really care about it. But also ones who like just give you a hard time for no reason at all. So that's some of the things that are challenging about my job, is the loneliness, and also like being I guess goaded for no reason by people who are upset that you're just trying to do your job. So they have like some of them have like vendettas against the government, so they take it out on you since you're the lowest person and you're right there in their face. So that's some of the challenging parts. And then another challenging part I would say is people who just don't get the environment, who don't care. Like on the beach I work in Texas, there's a posted speed limit that during turtle nesting season you only can go 15 miles per hour. That people every day avoid, or not really avoid, decide not to listen to the 15 miles per hour and go 20, 30, 50 miles per hour when there's not only nesting sea turtles that are coming on the beach, but also kids and family that are on the beach, that yet they still speed because they're in a hurry to get to their favorite fishing spot. So it's just challenging challenging to work with people who don't really obey the rules, because it's their way of doing things, or my family's been coming to this park for blah 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 years. I can do this how I want. So yeah, those are some of the challenging spots.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and answer the question next. So I am a interpretive park ranger, as well as a graduate student in a master's program at NAU. And I'm also a Pathways student. So I'm a student employee with the National Park Service. And Pathways, what that means is that it's a program for, I believe, as young as high school students, and then undergraduate college students and graduate students to work with a federal agency. So in my case, I work with the National Park Service. And you work there during the duration of your education, or they also have a separate program for recent graduates who have a college degree already, and like within 2 years after you get your degree, you can participate in this Pathways program. But anyway, I'm in the student one where I'm currently a student. So once I graduate, I have like 3 months, 90 days of competitive hiring status. So I can apply to wherever I want to, and like as long as I qualify for it. So that's really nice, because with the federal service, it is pretty competitive, especially considering things like veteran preference and all of that. So I would highly suggest looking into pathways, because that would be a great outlet for you to get your foot in the door, and if you want to pursue a career with a certain agency. So that's what I'm doing. So as far as my role as a park ranger, with the National Park Service, there's different forms of park rangers. So like I mentioned before, I'm interpretation. I deal a lot with the visitors. Just to briefly describe the other park rangers, there's the law enforcement rangers who get to drive around the park and regulate things and enforce regulations with law of disobeying park visitors and what have you. And then there's different divisions, such as maintenance that Alex kind of mentioned earlier, and then the biology, and at our park we call it cultural resources. So we have like archaeologists, and then there's administration. So if you're into business, there's that option as well. So with the National Park Service, it's not just one group, there's all these different divisions. So in my division, it's interpretation, and I do interact with the visitors. So I work the front desk, greet visitors, but a big part of my job is doing interpretive programs. So that is helping with how the museum looks and like what's presented there for park visitors to learn from, as well as doing in-person programs such as leading tours and guiding hikes. We have a large canyon where the cliff dwellings are, and our tours range between 3 to 4 hours. And it's like 1,000 feet elevation change. It's just like stairs that go down into the canyon. And a visitor counted it once. There's 967 stairs. So going up that like 3 to 5 times a week, it is challenging at the beginning of the season, but it's really great by the end. But yeah, during my tours, I talk about everything from the environment. So we do have a relic forest at our park that was left behind during the last ice age about 10 to 20,000 years ago. And it's really unique to our area because it's just all desert and canyons. But down in the canyon, there's a forest that has quaking aspen, Douglas fir, box elder, like the list goes on. And they're all preserved down there because there's natural springs feeding into it. So that's a neat thing about our park that people like to see. We actually get to walk through it and all of that too. And then I talk about the history, so like how the park was formed in the first place, and then also about the various tribes who lived in the area and continue to live in the area. And then there's the people history as well. So we do mention the first recorded visitors to our park. We do stray from the term discovered. We don't like to say that people discovered the cliff dwellings. We usually say first recorded visitors. And then because Indigenous people have been here for hundreds and hundreds of years and we're aware of these cliff dwellings. So that's a term we stray from. And sorry, I'm kind of losing my train of thought. As a graduate student, again, I'm in the master's program with Parks and Recreation Management. And a big part of that I do at my park is trying to get more representation of Indigenous people at parks, not just at my park, but at various parks. And I'm focusing on the Intermountain region, which spans from Texas to up north in Montana, like that whole area, including Arizona and Utah, like Colorado. So I'm working with various national parks, national monuments in that area. So just to give a quick example, I work with Grand Canyon, I'm working with Grand Teton, Fort Laramie, and then some down south like Saguaro down in Tucson. And all these parks that are either on or near Native American reservations. And I'm kind of analyzing how they interpret these Indigenous cultures at their parks for park visitors to learn from. Because something that from working at the park I work at, I've been here for 5 years now, is that we do get a lot of visitors, and a lot of their views before visiting us is stereotypical. So like at the beginning of my tours, I usually ask people like, hey, what's your prior knowledge of Indigenous people? And they're like, oh, John Wayne movies. So I'm like, okay, we're starting from square one. And so I figured that's what happens at other parks too. And from my interviews so far with these NPS employees, that is the case. And they are more than willing to integrate more Indigenous representation into their interpretive programs, into their museums, but they just don't know how to do that. And so what I'm doing is also interviewing and talking to tribal members from all these different tribes, like the Hopi, the Navajo, the Zuni, the list goes on. And I'm asking them how they want to be represented. And it's really important when you want to start or strengthen a tribal partnership to have them come to you and talk to you rather than saying, hey, this is what we want from you. It's really important that they speak for themselves, and like you're the one who's listening and you're like, okay, yes, we'll do it your way, because that's the big thing, is to be authentic and be respectful. So yeah, and then just combine, I hope that this all makes sense, but just combine that information from the tribal perspective and the National Park Service perspective, and hoping to create this guide that parks can reference when they're trying to either establish or strengthen their partnership or collaboration with tribes. That way they can really understand each other and what they want to be presented to the general public in their parks. So that's a big thing. I think, oh, and then the environmental stuff with my role, I did kind of briefly mention just going out into hikes and all of that, but we do work with youth a lot as well. And currently at the park, we're doing a cultural garden project where we are planting the garden with plants that the ancestral Pueblo people would have been planting several hundred years ago, which is corn, beans, and squash, and a couple of others. So the students are planting it in their greenhouse at their school. This is like before COVID. And then we transplant it to our park. And then we have two high school, college-age students who create interpretive signage for it that talks about it from like a scientific point of view and then also a cultural point of view. And the visitors can learn about the plants that way. So it's a really great program. We also do junior ranger day camps and overnight camps. So we take students out and we do a lot of environmental education with them, which is great because, like I mentioned earlier, there's a high lack of environmental education here on the reservation. And then another challenge is, we get a lot of international visitors, and they have these preconceived notions that Native Americans are all the same. When in reality, there's a couple hundred different tribes and we all practice things differently. So, and it's also confusing that we're called Navajo National Monument, and people think that the cliff dwellings in the canyon are Navajo, when in reality they're Pueblo. So they're Hopi, they're Zuni, they're San Juan Southern Paiute. So that's like every single day, they're like, why is this called Navajo National Monument when those are not Navajo? So I get that question all the time. So that's a big challenge, is trying to help visitors understand the difference between tribes. And then another thing is representation matters. And what I mean by that is that our park does involve the Hopi, the Zuni, the San Juan Southern Paiute, and the Navajo. So it's important that they're all represented, if not equally, but at least to some extent. And that's pretty challenging because it is difficult to get a hold of different tribal members in our area because we don't have a good access to Wi-Fi and internet and all of that. And our cell service is pretty poor out here. And then also with tribal communities, our like local representation, like our local government, is just like, there's so many people missing from these roles that are needed. Like what, for example, in my community, we have a chapter president who's in charge of the local government, but we don't have a vice president and we don't have a secretary. So it's really hard to work with communities who are not fully structured like that. So yeah, that's what I do here at Navajo. And if you have any questions, just let us know.
All right, so this will be our last question before we move into the Q&A, giving audience an opportunity to ask. So are there specific volunteer extracurricular activities or internships that led you to be in your position today? And do you have advice for aspiring professionals of color who would like to pursue a career like yours?
So it's exciting to hear all the pathways for environmental careers. With my own experience, I'm also a volunteer for the National Sierra Club, and there's a lot of opportunities as well over there in that organization. I served as a board member, a vice president of the board for like 7 years, and the only, again, Filipino American on the board. And, you know, representation matters in the work that we do. One of the flagstone projects or campaigns we have is our Wild America campaign that carries on the Sierra Club's long legacy of protecting our beautiful and diverse wildlands since its founding by John Muir, like in 1892. So we help, you know, protect millions of acres of wild places from its early efforts to halt logging and mining in the Sierra Nevada. We have been in the front lines establishing hundreds of millions of acres of wilderness, national parks, and monuments, protecting the wildlife and its habitat, and gaining, you know, passage of the Wilderness Act. We believe in America's public lands, waters, air, and wildlife that are held in public trust, you know, for all Americans. And we know that we have to be motivated to get involved in that fight to protect our wild legacy. One other thing that I would like to mention as part of my involvement is the Outdoors for All campaign that the Sierra Club has. And this campaign works to really broaden universal access to nature for children and youth, as well as to empower, you know, veterans to continue their service in protecting the land that they defend. So empowering the youth from communities with limited access to connect and reconnect to the outdoors, or for the benefit of both. We have the Inspiring Connection Outdoors program as well that create the next generation of environmental justice and social justice leaders through, you know, building community and increasing exposure to outdoor recreation and advocacy. We also have the Sierra Club Military Outdoors program that sends military personnel and their families on, you know, adventures like hiking, skiing, rafting, both before and after deployment, free of the cost. And then we also offer, of course, the discount to service veterans for any other Sierra Club outings. So that alone, in terms of my voluntary involvement, again, makes me able to learn about the history of the environmental movement, you know, really looking at the parallels between past movements, how decisions are being made, and the social justice issues that come about. We have about 600 something parks here in Southern California, but access to those parks is limited, and so we're working on opening that as well. But in my role, right, here as a commissioner for LADWP, there's this huge opportunity to connect the dots for people seeking environmental careers, and for our utility to become an economic engine for those local jobs. We would like to fund education and workforce development programs with a priority focus on those that serve communities facing historic or systemic barriers to equitable outcomes. We'd like to see probably a green jobs initiative to increase utility workforce diversity to reflect the communities that we serve. We are already developing and leading annual events that center on social justice, racial justice, and equity. And I know that, we have sort of like entry-level jobs. We have 11,000 employees. And with the focus on clean energy, there will be thousands more jobs that will be available. And most of those jobs are really environmentally connected. We initiated the utility pre-craft trainee program 10 years ago to fill the gap, bringing together people who need good jobs with the city. And this is one where we have a pre-apprenticeship training for folks who would like to go into the crafts, like being an electrical mechanic, labor maintenance laborer. And we know that that opportunities abound with that. And we're also developing a utility worker position. It's brand new, exempt, entry level, as I mentioned earlier. We don't want the civil service to be a barrier. So these utility worker position that's currently being reviewed right now will open up avenues for, again, for gardener, caretakers, tool room workers, maintenance laborers, electricians. These opportunities are enhanced by community partnerships. We work very closely with LA Trade Tech on a number of the initiatives ranging from recruitment to developing new classes, training programs. So I want to advise our audience today to really seize the moment when an opportunity arises. Take it. Amplify your voice. Most of the ones that are really engaged in the type of work in the environment should listen and learn. We would like to see folks that we hire who live near their place of work. We want to ensure that equitable access to a broad range of careers, advance, women of color and LGBTQ individuals to positions of leadership within the department, and really provide frontline communities access to those high quality, high wage jobs in the renewable energies sector. And we want to prioritize that recruitment. So what advice can I give you? If you want if you're really passionate about an environmental career, it's likely that there is a job that's a fit for you in the environmental sector. It's one of the fastest growing jobs or employment in many areas with nonprofits, government agencies like the parks, are non-governmental organizations as well. So many people are passionate and know that they want to make a difference. Think about what you really want to focus on based on what you're passionate about and the skills that you have. And from there, narrow it down. You can be a community organizer if you want to make difference in the local community. You can be a policy analyst in the local, state, and federal government agencies and other academic institutions. That's an emerging field right now. You can be a scientist. Jobs in environmental science and environmental engineering are both growing. We have a lot of our chemists as well, and water quality folks in the Department of Water and Power. There's architects that really look at sort of like really acting as caretaker of the land. Urban planners, folks with background in city planning might have good luck getting hired by cities. And we have campaign managers for our different campaigns at the Department of Water and Power. So once that you've pinpointed the skills that you have, if you love nature, there's a whole lot of opportunity out there for you to engage. I love, Alex, when you talk about birds, that's one of my things I would like to learn about more as you go through your hikes, right? The next step is to really make sure that you determine the area you're most passionate about. There are jobs working to improve the environment in many ways. And if you're still in school, one of the important things to do is to get real world experience through internships or class projects. A great strategy also is to combine, say, your environmental sciences or engineering or other technical degree with something that focuses on the human side, like sociology or psychology or public administration. And then you network. Your networking field will help you get where you want to be. Try to meet people who work at other organizations you're interested with. Many of the jobs necessary for an inclusive and green economy exists, and many career pathways have already been created for us here in this new green economy that we are in. It's also important as a student, right? To attend, campus events. We go to organize our visits to campus to talk about opportunities here at DWP, talk about the employment setting, enhanced jobs placements, and also connect with you about our apprenticeship programs. So because we want to increase the number of apprenticeship opportunities on the job, learning, internship of opportunities related to green careers. We have our student worker program as well. And we have a lot of resources within the city to help. We have LA-RISE, which is a collaborative partnership with the city and county for workforce development. We have Hire LA's Youth, that's offering virtual and in-person jobs for young people between the ages of 14 and 24 who live in the city of LA. We have that free program and working with the youth source centers, helping you complete the diplomas, go to college, get mentoring and training. There's so many things that are resources that are here within the city of LA. And I'm gonna leave my email address so you can connect with me if there's any question that you have about employment, careers, and also resources for our youth in the city of Los Angeles. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah, so for me, I would say if you want to be a wildlife biologist, definitely go ahead and start getting animal handling experience, whether that's through farm work or working at a pet shelter, a humane society. Go ahead and start getting that wildlife and animal handling experience. I think that was one of the big things that helped me to get hired by some of the agencies and companies that I worked for, was the animal handling experience I had. Like in college, I worked at a organic cattle and free range chicken farm. I helped them with their animals, and I also did some tours there. And then in high school, I was a part of a adoption event or adoption club where we went to get shelter animals like cats and dogs adopted. So definitely go ahead and if you want to be a wildlife biologist, get that animal handling experience. But also seek out other opportunities. Like for me, I got experience banding waterfowl, so like ducks, with the Fish and Wildlife Service. And I really enjoyed that. But when I came back home, I didn't have any bird banding experience, and I just Googled bird banding near me, and that popped up. So Google is a great resource for like finding experience. If you want it, you can find anything on Google. So I found a bird banding station near me that was probably like an hour away, and I reached out to them, and I've been volunteering with them for almost probably like 4 years, I would say now. Going on 4 years. So you want to try to get as much volunteer experience you can with wildlife handling, but also you still need communication skills and organization skills as well. So get involved with different extracurricular activities that can help you to develop or redefine those skills. If you want to go ahead and have like get grant writing skills or just writing in general. Surprising a lot, wildlife biologists, we write a lot. We write reports, write data sheets and everything. So you want to go ahead and have writing experience if you have. And surprisingly enough, wildlife biologists, you need plant identification skills too. Plants and animals are intertwined. Just because you're going to be working with wildlife doesn't mean you're just going to be focusing only on wildlife. So you definitely want to have plant skills. So join like a local naturalist group if you can to get those experience. Like I said, there's all these opportunities are available. Like just Googling different clubs, you can find opportunities available. And I encourage you to volunteer, but also I encourage you not to like get taken advantage of. Like you should never have to pay to volunteer. So there's a lot of opportunities out there that you have to pay that are for you to pay to volunteer. Don't do any of those. There's plenty of opportunities that will either pay you to come and work, or they will it's free. You don't have to pay anything because you're gaining a skill set. So like I volunteer a lot, but also some of the volunteers that I do, it's because it will give me skills for later on in life. So you can look at it that way. Like if this volunteer is worth it because you're going to gain a skill, or if you're volunteering because it's what you're passionate about. So that's how when I decide if I want to volunteer to do something, I look at it in those two ways. If it's not serving any of those two purposes, I don't look at it. And I definitely don't pay to volunteer. So there's a lot of especially for the sea turtle world, there's a lot of opportunities out there that say, hey, we'll pay. Say, hey, come over here, and you pay this much. I don't know. Let's say $3,000 a summer to come and work with sea turtles. But don't pick any of those. Like there's opportunities out there where you don't have to pay. And then some advice. Don't be afraid to shoot your shot. I shot my shot trying to get a job for the National Park Service. I had never actually worked with sea turtles before, just interpreted about them at the Georgia Aquarium while they're in the enclosure. But I never actually handled a sea turtle. But I shot my shot, and I got the job working with the National Park Service as a sea turtle biologist. I do think that some of my experiences helped me to get that job. So working with the Fish and Wildlife Service, I got a lot of different field skills that was able to be transferred to the job working with sea turtles. So that helped me to get that position. So when you're volunteering or you're finding these jobs, make sure you're getting opportunities that are going to give you transferable skills that can be transferred to different areas of life and not just that one position. I mean, some positions are very like strategic and you need a certain skill, but other jobs, you definitely want something that's transferable so you can continue to take it with you to the next job or build upon it. And some of those opportunities, I guess some opportunities that are available that for like internships and jobs, I'll send this to Bridget so she can send it out. That the Student Conservation Association That's where I got my first internship outside of college as a park ranger. But they have plenty of different other environmental and natural resources focused internships. Some of them are course positions where you're on a team, and others are individual placements where you're working with a different agency by yourself, but you're there one intern, or maybe there's a second intern. But the Student Conservation Association, AmeriCorps is another good one. Well, YCC, if you're in high school, they have a youth conservation course. Really, it's high school to like 21 that you can do. It's you can find that on the federal job board, USA Jobs. And then also, like pathways position. One of my positions with the National Park Service was also a pathways position. So they have positions for recent graduates, but also current students. Technically, I'm still a pathways student because I'm in school, and my park is the Manassas National Battlefield up in Virginia. But right now I'm in school. I'm focusing on my coursework right now, so I'm on hold for that pathways position. So check out those opportunities if you want to get into this field. Those opportunities are available. And then lastly, like use Twitter, Instagram to your advantage. There's a lot of different BIPOC scientists out there that you can follow and connect with, who will help to show you the ropes. Like I would say we're not like the old scientists where I don't know, from my experience when I was trying to get into this field, a lot of people were like, oh, I'm not gonna help you get this job because I'm applying for it too. Like we're all applying for the same job, so I can't help you. But nowadays, I think this younger generation, my generation of scientists, like yes, I'll help you apply for your job because eventually it may come a point where I'm like you help me out. So if I help you, I tell you about this job and you get it, maybe I need a job along the line, or maybe when I have a job, we have to work together. So we already have a relation together, so it'll work benefit us both. Or maybe it's like I don't need anything from you, but here's the job. Like you're better qualified. You can have it. Or maybe I'm interested in something else. But it's not like the other older generation where it's like I'm applying for this job, so you can't know anything about it. Like in a selfish way. But there's plenty of jobs out there. There's enough room at the table for everyone. So we shouldn't be like stingy with it. So definitely go ahead and reach out to people on Instagram and Twitter. And also, like, since the pandemic, there's been a lot of different organizations and nonprofits started that are helping to connect different people of color to other scientists or jobs. Like one of the organizations that I sit on the board of is Black Marine Scientists. We're now an official nonprofit, and one of our goals is to not only amplify Black scientists, but also engage and connect people who want to be in the scientific, in the marine science field, to people who are already in the scientific field, so they can get to know, they can know what the actual field is like, what some of the challenges, what some of the experience we have, and any like tips and tricks for not only getting to the field, but staying in the field, and how not to get burned out. So definitely reach out to these orgs that came about since the pandemic, and throughout social media. Like there's a lot of different scientists and individuals that's working in the natural resource and environmental field that you can get in contact with. Like it's not like the olden days where everybody is in a phone book, so you have to go find a phone book, look up. But most of everyone has the internet access. So you have a connection right there to millions of different scientists and people in the natural resource field. So don't be afraid to reach out to anybody, especially if they're in the career field that you want to be in. Like they know what it takes. They know how to get there. So go ahead and reach out. Like I've been in this field. I still have mentors that been in this field longer than me that I reach out to. I reached out to somebody else earlier this week about one of my projects. Like I found some ants in the field. So I don't study ants, but someone else does. So I reached out to them to get their opinion on what's going on at my field site. So definitely don't be afraid to reach out. I guess, like I say, there's an old saying, closed mouths don't get fed. So sing loud, be like a bird, and just continue singing.
Hi, I can answer that question about how to get into this career. I'm on the tail end of a 25-year of being an accidental ranger. I always say I'm an accidental ranger because that was not my original plan. My original plan was to be, I went to school for criminal justice. I was, got accepted to the academy at LAPD. I was going to be a police officer. And then I was like, I decided I wouldn't do that. I did several things, and I round up at my current agency, the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority, on a 2-week temporary assignment. And the head of the agency, Joseph Edmonston, came into my office. He looked at my resume and he's like, "What do you think about being a ranger?" And I said, what do they do? Because my limited ideal ranger was, Ranger Smith, Yogi Bear. That was pretty much it. And I am what you call a generalist ranger, which means I'm law enforcement, I'm a firefighter, maintenance, lead the heights. We do everything. I always say it's a reason why rangers are known for their hats, because we have to wear several hats. And so, like I said, it went from being a ranger to I then in 2006 got involved with the International Ranger Federation. The agency allowed me to attend that Congress in Scotland, and I've attended every 3 years. We have our Congress. I then became the secretary of the International Ranger Federation, and there for 3 years, and we had our last Congress in Nepal. So this career has allowed me to do several things, that go places that I had no idea that I would be able to go. People ask me every day, how do I become a ranger? I always tell them, the first question I ask them is, what do you think we do? And that kind of would dictate what type of ranger that you want to be. Like I said, I'm a generalist ranger. National Park Service, it's a large organization, a governmental agency. So the rangers that you see in National Park Service are usually inter rangers. You rarely see the law enforcement rangers unless there's a long bear jam or something like that. They're kind of in the background. And so there's different types of being a ranger. You got the Park Ranger Association. That's a good resource. Thank goodness for the internet. You can find whatever interest that you want and research it. I always suggest that, when you find a career, any career that you want to do, you find someone that's doing that career, you pick their brain, and like we're doing here, we're sharing our journeys of how we got there, because there's many pathways to get to the same location. Like I said, again, I had never expected to be a ranger. Again, 25 years, I'm getting ready to retire, and it's just like I'm actively looking for my replacement. So it's like, for as a Black woman, it's, I see other Blacks in the park and we talk, and there's a lot of people that are scared. We used to have we call a camp in our Temescal Gateway Park. It was a educational camp, and it was through LAUSD. So you have all these kids of color that come in there, and they're like all scared by day 1. By day 3, the sounds of the nature don't really bother them anymore. And the fact that they didn't realize just how close they were to nature, that was always rewarding, because that was their first experience. And I attend these different meetings, and I always tell people, look, we have engaged into nature, the environment, so they can get that emotional attachment to it. Because a lot of the people that have traditionally been in the environmental movement, that's where they got their emotional attachment, and that's where they got their passion. So if you can get anybody, but especially children, emotionally attached to the environment, they will work that much harder to protect the environment and their surroundings. But also when we talk about, green jobs and green technologies, we have to keep in mind human beings like convenience. So you have to make it convenient for them and tell them, this is how it benefits you, and keep that in mind. Not say you need to have this. This is how this benefits you and will make your life easier, healthier, and less stressful. That's what human beings tend to like. But it's like I said, going, like I said, from a temp worker to being able to meet rangers from literally every corner of the world. I think I'm on probably about 4 or 5 different WhatsApp chats for different countries in South America, in Asia, in Europe, in Africa. And the thing is, we all have the same issues. The severity of our issues may differ, but we all have the same issues that we're dealing with. And like the International Ranger Federation, they're there to support, rangers around the world, but also it's important to get a level of professionalism, a standard professionalism across the board for all rangers around the world, so they can get the proper training, get the proper equipment, that they can do their jobs in a safe manner. The job that I do, like I said, I'm a journalist. Right now, I do filming. When I do filming and do film permits, I got to keep in mind that how much of an impact this is going to make to the park. How much of an impact it's going to make to our park visitors. That's what I have. That's what I have to think about. I've been dealing with the homeless since 2006. And so that's another aspect of my job, talking to the homeless. When I meet a new homeless person, I try to have a conversation with them because I want to know, how did we get here? And, and so you can identify what their priorities are or where they are, their willingness to get help. So like I said, my job is very diverse, which is good because it makes my day go by faster, but it makes it also a lot more interesting. Like again, journalist, I'm glad I became a journalist ranger. I, will forever be grateful for Joseph Edmiston for recruiting me as come into my office and ask me that question and, open up that world. But you have to be open to new experiences. And I think especially growing up in the Black community, it's like you hear the message within the community of, well, Black people don't like the outdoors. Black people are not a ranger. I have family members that still think that. They're like, where are you working in the outdoors? But we have to be open to new experiences, even if it scares us. We have to take that leap. Like you said, you need to shoot your shot and just go for it. But life is about taking, those chances and being open to new experiences. And even if you don't see someone that may look like you, if it interests you, you still go for it. And it's just like, quit waiting for people I need to have someone that looks just like me that has my same experience. Well, that's not how life works. You need to take chances that if you're interested in something, you go for it. And it's like, hey, maybe it won't pan out, but you won't have any regrets if you went for it. So it's just like, I encourage, more work with the young people, but also there are so many different jobs and careers within this community. I mean, you talked about the NGOs and non-governmental organizations, which basically that's a lot of international things. So
thank you for sharing your experience in the parks in Los Angeles. Really appreciate your perspective. We just want to give Kelkiyana one more chance to answer this question before we close out. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Jewel. I'm actually typing a message for you because I do want to hear more about the organizations you're involved in as a ranger. And then I'll be really quick, because I know we're running out of time. I did kind of already mention that I did Youth Conservation Corps and what else? Oh, and I'm a pathway student. But I kind of want to talk about this from a person who's naturally an introvert and who's currently a interpretive park ranger with the National Park Service. And this goes to just what Jewel was talking about, is to just go for it, even if you don't think it's comfortable or right for you. Yeah, just go for it, because that's pretty much what I did, and how I got here is asking questions. So like, what's the worst that could happen? They don't know the answer, but more than likely they'll like direct you to someone who does know the answer. So when I was doing my undergraduate at Fort Lewis, I was involved in various organizations that helped my resume to get me where I'm at today. These various organizations included being like a student ambassador for the college. I also was a student orientation leader, helping new students adapt to the college life. And then I also participated in Village Aid Project, which I traveled to Nicaragua for 2 summers and did environmental assessments and helped build clean water systems for communities down there. And so how I got involved with all of that is, again, asking questions and venturing out of my comfort zone, which is really, really important to do. And then some advice as well. Once you ask questions, you get exposed to all these different people and different occupations. So that also goes into building connections with different people. And once you build connections with different people, the more opportunities come your way. I always get emails from people like, hey, I thought about you and your research. Like, look at this, or look at this cool opportunity. So that's really important to build a network. And then also being in the Native American in the position that I'm in, working at the park that I'm at, visitors say to me all the time that they're glad I'm there and that I'm the one sharing this information with them. And just hearing comments like that, it really encourages and inspires me to learn more about my own heritage. Because I think that's really important for each of us as a person of color to know more about where we come from and who we are. And that's what my job does for me, is really inspires me to learn more about that. And then I'll end with just working in a place where you feel appreciated and welcomed and included. I think that's heavily important wherever you choose to work. Make sure that you're appreciated for the work that you're putting into it. And if not, I'm pretty sure there's another place out there that will appreciate your input and what you bring to the team and overall organization. So thank you so much. Thank you. I love being a part of this panel.
All right, great. Thank you, everyone, including our surprise guest, Ranger Jewel. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. This was a really great discussion about the variety of different perspectives and experiences you can have working in the environmental sector. There's a wide range of career choices to choose from. So that's really exciting to think about and to consider as aspiring young environmental professionals. I'll be sure to include a lot of the different resources that the different speakers have shared out with the recording. So I'll follow up with the panelists about that. But yeah, thank you everyone for being here today, and keep an eye out for